How y'all doing this morning? All right. I'm extremely honored to be here today. This is beyond my wildest dreams for what I would have ever saw myself doing with my life and my future. And so I just want to let y'all know how extremely grateful I am for each and every one of y'all and the opportunity that y'all presented me with and being in such a beautiful and historic place. There was a statement said earlier that kind of reminded me what I wanted to talk to you all about. She said, basically, in the same way you wouldn't recognize symmetry apart from asymmetry, you would not recognize hope apart from hopelessness. So today, I want to talk to you about hopelessness and what it has to do with symmetry, because I want y'all to begin to see the symmetry of hope. See, when my life started out, I started in a very hopeless place. I'm actually from the hood. I was born and raised in the Dunbar Village housing projects. My grandmother was on crack cocaine when she brought me into this world. Now, as a child living with my grandmother, I never recognized anything as being off or wrong. I thought it was normal until I grew up watching my friends. They had moms, they had dads, yet I lived with my grandma. My grandmother loved me. She was one of the sweetest, most loving, most protective people that I've ever known in my life. But she had one problem that would affect me greatly throughout my childhood, and that was her struggle with alcoholism. My grandmother was a binge drinker, so whenever she would drink for weeks at a time, seemingly. So if you could imagine being a little boy coming home from school, and I always knew the warning sign that the next few weeks were going to be a rough few weeks when I saw her with her first beer in her hand. As I walked through the projects, I could see her on the porch with that first beer. Now, when you're growing up with anyone in a family of alcoholism, you know how rough it could be. Whatever my grandmother would cook last time she was sober, I'd have to eat that until she sobered up again, or she recognized she needed to change the dishes and cook something else for me. My mom had 4 boys, I'm the third of which. Both of my older brothers are the reason I didn't turn out the way I could have. Both of my older brothers were high school dropout drug dealers in the community. But the one thing they made clear to me is that they didn't want me following in their footsteps. To give a little more context to my family, my grandmother had 7 children. Every last one of her children struggled at some point in their life with crack addiction or alcoholism. Every last one of them. So as a little boy growing up, seeing my family dynamics, not having a father figure in my life, I naturally looked to my older brothers for direction in life. And to me, they were the successful ones. I felt like my options were slim. I was either gonna sell dope or do it. So that trajectory started really young for me, as early as 3rd grade. I remember I was labeled as emotionally handicapped and as having a slow learning disability. That was all it took for me to realize that I would never graduate high school like many of my peers. I wasn't smart enough. I simply couldn't cut it. I ended up going into middle school, and that's when I surrounded myself with young men from my community who were like me. They were from my hood, they came from situations like mine, and that's when that path to hopelessness began to uptick. It was like you're already born on an escalator, but that escalator is going in the wrong direction. It's going down. As soon as you were born, you were placed on the escalator and it's going down. All you have to do is nothing, and you're gonna end up at the bottom. Me and my friends started out, we go steal out of the neighborhood Walgreens. Things would escalate to in school, we get bored and we get the idea, let's jump this person. We get into fights almost every day after school for jumping on innocent people who didn't deserve it. But you know what they say, hurt people hurt people. And we were hurt. I was tired of seeing my mom struggle to keep the lights and the water on, my grandmother have to be the backbone of the family, my older brothers in and out of prison for trying to make a living for me and my younger brother. I had a lot of frustration. I go to school, you see kids who had a privilege that you would never know. Do you know that it's a privilege just to come to school and not worry about what you're wearing, to just put on clothes and go? To not be afraid to bring homework home because you got people that are there to help you with homework? You know what I did with homework when I was in middle school? I balled it up and I put it in the garbage on the way out of class because I knew that there was no way in hell I was going to be able to focus on homework with the conditions that we were living in. So by my 9th grade year, I show up on the campus of Forest Hill High, first day of school. They can't find my name in the system. They say, come with us to the office. Mr. Aiken, you've been expelled. You're not allowed to be on campus. That was my 9th grade year. I was expelled because of all the trouble that I got into in middle school. So there I was in an alternative school. In my head, though, this was no big deal. This was all a part of the plan because I had the grand scheme in mind that when I turned 16, I was going to be like my brothers. See, there was this thing in the hood called the truancy officers where if you were out of school prior to the age of 16, you can get pulled over by the truancy officers and taken into a holding center. So at 16, you were old enough to lie and say you had a job. So I was only just waiting until I was old enough to drop out of school to sell dope like my older brothers had done. When you don't have a father figure in your life, your older brothers are that figure for you. And they were men without fathers themselves. Me and my friends throughout high school, our trouble started to escalate where we go to these dance parties on weekends and we get in the same kind of fights that we get into when we were in middle school. Only things would escalate, where it would start out a fight after a party, and then that fight after a party would turn into someone on the other side getting a gun, shooting at us, running us off, and then my friends got access to guns, and we shoot at them and run them off. And so by the age of 16, 17 years old, I'm losing my friends. I'm losing people that I ran around the projects with as children. They are dying at the ages of 16, 17 years old. And the people that we were beefing with, fighting with, they were people from our same projects who happened to have moved a few blocks over. That's how sinister inner city gun violence is. It's essentially families killing families just because they live in another part of the community. I remember I came to a breaking point. My grandmother had died, and we found ourselves living back with our mom. But we found ourselves residing in a shed behind an abandoned house. Both of my brothers were away in prison. It was just my mom at this point. My grandmother, who had always been the backbone, who would always take her children in, was now dead. So my mother had to fend for herself. My mother at this time in her life, her drug addiction had gotten the best of her. It had consumed her life so much so that the only place we could find shelter was in a shed behind an abandoned house. See, this was normal. I don't know if you know this about people who have to endure suffering, but people have the ability to normalize their suffering. Where to outsiders, it's like you look and you see a video of children in Africa, and here you'll look and you'll say, oh, that's so sad. But you go to Africa and those people are the most joyous people you'll ever meet in your life because they somehow found peace in the midst of such misery. We have the ability to normalize our suffering. So I remember it was nothing to be living in the shed. At this time, I had finally dropped out of school. I had been selling weed for a while. Now I was dabbling into selling crack. And I'm on the way to following in the footsteps of my older brothers. One night in particular, I remember, I was out smoking with my friends. And marijuana has always had the opposite effect on me than it has on most people. I guess most people, they smoke it, they chill, they relax, they're vibing. Me, I become highly self-critical. It's like I see my life in a way that I'd never seen it before. And I remember I was smoking with my friend, and I came home to this shed. I opened the door, and my mom and my little brother were arguing. They were having a full-blown argument. But this was normal. We never respected my mother because of the way we were growing up. I didn't even respect my mother because she didn't raise me. So talking back to my mom was the norm. But for some reason on this night, it was different. On this night, there was something wrong with this picture. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. He shouldn't be talking to his mother like this. My mom shouldn't be choosing drugs over raising her children. I shouldn't be dropped out of high school selling dope. It's like for the first time in my life, I recognized that if I didn't begin to make drastic changes in my life, I was going to end up in prison like my brothers or dead like so many of my peers. My life was hopeless up to that point. Fast forward, there were some people that came into my life that served as mentors. One was a pastor at a local organization. Another was my goddad, Michael Newsom. These people came into my life because once I had that eye-opening experience, I realized that I needed to take control of my life. I could no longer stay on this escalator, heading in the wrong direction, heading to a downward destiny. I had to stop, turn around, and not walk in the opposite direction that the escalator was taking me. I needed to run, but I couldn't run alone. I had people come into my life who believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. They spoke life into me when I had no life within me. They spoke vision over my life when I couldn't even see. After a few months, then a year, I began to believe those people. Because before, it's like, man, what are you talking about? You don't know nothing. You don't know me. I'm slow. I didn't finish school. I come from this family. My mom's this. And I had all these excuses. But I slowly began to believe what those people were saying about me. And that was the beginning of hope. See, that's where all the hopelessness, all the despair that I endured up to that point in my life, it suddenly took on a meaning. It became fuel that I would use to push me forward in life. I ended up going back and getting my GED. And then after getting my GED, I was fortunate enough to graduate from EMT school. I had this childhood dream that I wanted to be a fireman. And I'm like, when I first started, I'm like, I'll never finish EMT school. I didn't even finish school. I'm slow. All those labels, I had them. But when I graduated from EMT school, I felt like every excuse I had fell away from me. It's like the shackles of labels that I had labeled myself with fell to the wayside. And I began to wonder if what's happened in my life and the new hope that I found in my life can happen in my life, why can't it happen for my peers? Why can't it happen for my friends? Now that organization and those mentors that helped me out, I was Urban Youth Impact, and I ended up going on staff with that organization because I wanted to serve my community the way these people served me. And that was my life for many years. I saw myself going from nonprofit organization to nonprofit organization, trying to be what I feel like I needed to young people in these communities. But one thing I'd always see was a disconnect between what most organizations were offering and what I felt like I really needed at that time in my life. It was the summer of 2015, one of the deadliest summers on records for West Palm Beach. We had over 108 murders. A majority of those murders happened in my community, the Tamarind Corridor. Most of the young men murdered looked like me. I saw an opportunity to use my life experiences, to use the hopelessness that I had known to create a solution that a friend of mine told me last night. He said this, Ricky, you are the solution to a problem that has no solution. Because for many years, most people in my community would see the gun violence that continued to ravage the young people in our community, and we'd be helpless and hopeless. We'd throw our hands up and we'd say, what can we do about this? What could we do about this? The government should be doing more. The president should be doing more. There was no meaningful solution. I remember the day like yesterday. My cousin Terrion and I stood in his front yard lamenting the fact that so many of the young brothers that we had grown up with were now dead before the age of 21. Many of the young men that we had mentored over the years were now dead, and there was no one in the community doing anything about it. That's when I recognized all that pain, all that misery, all that pressure equipped us to be the solution to the problem that we saw in our community. That's why our mission is to inspire and empower inner city youth to embody the change that they want to see in their community. It's my conviction that real change happens when the people who need it lead it. No one has more incentive to change what's happening in communities of concentrated disadvantage than the people who live there. But who's taking them this message? That's my job. See, Inner City Innovators isn't just a nonprofit organization. Inner City Innovators is a movement of people with balanced lives now, people who've dealt with the pressures, the adversities, and the pain that their childhood, and now they're using it to bring good to their hoods. So with the limited time I have left, I want my people to stand up. Stand up. These are my people. And each one of them with a unique story of their own, but each one of them are me reincarnated. Where before there was one person that cared about the young people and the violence plaguing our community, now you have community members, people who live in these neighborhoods that are dedicated themselves to eradicating youth delinquency and gun violence. My name is Ricky Aiken, and I hope that in my story, you were able to see the symmetry of hope. Everything has a purpose. You can't have the good only. It's the good and the bad that comes together to make us who we are. That's the symmetry of hope. Thank you for your time.